Chapter 7: Concerted Action in the Marketplace. The basic physical aspects of abundance are your actions in the marketplace of life. The universal law cannot mail you a check from the clouds. At some point, you have to get into the marketplace, find other humans, satisfy their needs in some way, and have them transfer a little symbology to your bank account. That's the recognized way. As you begin to open up to new possibilities and expand yourself, you will have to get out there and discover what is really happening in the world. It's pointless to raise your energy and have loads of people attracted to what you are if you haven't got something to sell them when they show up. That means, in basic terms, that you have to have a skill, knowledge, or product. There's nothing else in the world that people want. Of these three broad headings, a skill seems to me to be the least attractive. The problem with it being that you have to roll up each day and do it yourself personally. This can be time consuming, and eventually, time may limit how much you can earn in total for offering that skill. However, a skill does have an upside, especially in a world where everyone is mostly useless at what they do. If your skill is offered out of excellence and caring, if that excellence is understood and appreciated by people, then it will be impossible for you to starve. For the competition, wallowing as it does in mediocrity, allows you to stand out from the crowd without any real effort. And as long as you are effective and invest in letting people know who you are and what you do, your future is held in an ironclad guarantee. Again, we return to the point of you're having to invest in yourself. The reason why most people are so pathetic is that they will not take the time to develop and refine their skill. There is such a headlong rush in to make it in life to acquire the accoutrements of a fancy lifestyle that people tumble out and try to merchandise themselves before they have any real experience and while they know little about their chosen field. Doing so, they sentence themselves to perpetual struggle, for their efforts are mirrored in the same mediocrity offered by others. I think the old European system, whereby people were apprenticed to a master craftsman for 7 years, had its merits. For although the individual lived on a subsistence level through the years, he or she came out of that experience with pride and real skill. That talent was honored and recognized by society as being special. It is important to remember that quality will always survive. If you can perform a function well, you not only have the pleasure of knowing that you're damn good at what you do, but also you will eventually have a niche in a marketplace from which you can never be moved. To become special, you have to turn and move against the tide. The masses, drugged by apathy, living in mind numbing existence, and devoid of spirit, demand constant titillation and instant gratification. Thus, as their children become teenagers, it's natural for those children to react in the same way, caring little for excellence in the long term, living instead on a vapid diet of instant returns, lacking enduring substance. And why should anyone bother? If it doesn't work for them, then some anonymous body will fix it if things get too bad. In old China, skills were revered, and although the gardener was socially below the emperor, it was through his ability as a gardener that he redeemed himself and reached his goal in life. From the old Taoist philosophy, there developed in Japan Zen, in which action or order arises from one's attunement with the flow of things. A set of circumstances or even a skill has within it a perfection just for its very sake. And the end product of that perfection is honored for assisting in the overall balance of things. Thus, a Zen master potter is revered for he creates beauty. And that beauty, because of its perfect, assists people to see the God force in all things. So his work is eternal and godlike. It has spirit and meaning. It has worth that everyone recognizes, for in the shape and quality of his pots rests a material evidence of the immortality and infinity of all things. But for most people, imbuing their every act with excellence is just as it's just an intellectual concept. That excellence has to be acquired over a period of time. Most will not invest the time and effort involved, for they don't see that the product of their skills has an intrinsic merit that goes beyond what it can be sold for. There is a spiritual godliness that drifts naturally through the affairs of man, but it is visible only if actions are undertaken and performed with that godliness in mind. If you offer a skill in the marketplace of life and that skill is lifeless and lacking, then in performing that skill day to day, your whole energy takes on the same rhythmic boredom. Gradually, that boredom forces you to seek elsewhere, and you'll chop and change constantly, never attaining a proper skill at any one thing. It is better, therefore, that you instill a spiritual view in your work and see that your actions have a quality that provides spiritual growth as well as financial return. In this way, your actions become holy and have meaning. How long a thing takes is irrelevant, provided an overall balance is maintained. It's difficult for people to see a specialness in what for the most part, seems dreary and mundane. Yet it is the God force not in people? And if so, then where is the evidence of that God force if not in the actions and productions of those people? If a skill or craft is not your line, then perhaps you have knowledge that you can offer. We live in the information age. There are billions of people crying out to know how to do it. So if you know how it's done and where it is or what to do with it when you get it, you can share that information with others. What is nice about knowledge is that it can be imparted in many ways. Most of those who don't, most of those ways don't involve you after the initial production period, especially now that we are so sophisticated in our dispatch and retrieval methods. Knowledge can be imparted in 100 ways: TV, audio, tapes, books, manuals, floppy disk, compact disc, microfilm, seminars, and of course, the personal approach. Knowledge is incredibly valuable, yet often people miss the point for they can't imagine others paying them for a thought form. But knowledge is a commodity and you can sell it. I know how to do this. Pay me and I'll show you. I know where the last loaf of bread in New York is. Give me $1,000 and I'll tell you. Now, if you don't have information that anyone wants, then you're forced to invest in the acquisition of it. Some people believe in the overriding power of the educational system and feel that without a college degree, one isn't likely to make it in life. The problem is that for the most part, what they teach in college, nobody wants. Plus, everyone else got taught the same stuff when they were in college, so everybody knows it. I could see how a college degree would help if you wanted to help others get degrees they can't use. And I can see how a college degree might help if you were hoping to do brain surgery and stuff. But probably half of all the degrees they dish out won't get you a job in frying hamburgers. So you've got to decide if you want to mess with spending 3 to 5 years studying something that maybe no one will buy. I met a man once who got a grant to study some kind of beetle in South America. I asked him what he hoped to achieve, as I felt that the demand for that kind of work was not extensive. He told me that he was doing the research for the research's sake and nothing more. I told him that if he'd been clever enough to get a bunch of idiots to give him a grant to study some dumb beetle, then he was clever enough to go out and make a pile of cash. So, what was the point of this beetle stuff? In the end, I got it. The reason this man was studying a beetle that no one wanted was so he could avoid having to enter the marketplace of life for a few more years. The beetle developed meaning, not because anyone really cared what the hell the beetle did or didn't do, but because he needed it. No doubt he trotted off up a palm tree somewhere and counted beetles until the free money ran out, but what a waste. Of course, you don't have to have a degree to be rich. You just have to have ideas. Maybe having a degree sets you back, for it stuffs you into TikTok, and perhaps that stifles your creative mind. But the fact is that you have many millionaires have few educational qualifications of any kind at all. However, they still have knowledge. The difference is they have knowledge they can sell, and others have the common knowledge of TikTok, which isn't worth as much, if anything at all. The point about knowledge is that if you can sell the knowledge in some kind of educational or informative format, you can use it to place you in a profit making situation, or you can sell the end product. For example, by taking time to inform yourself about the various conditions of the marketplace, you will soon discover price differences that exist from place to place. That information is valuable to you, for you can then busy yourself moving stuff to places where people want it at prices they want to pay. But it always comes back to, what do you know that others do not? Or who do you know? The other thing that strikes me about knowledge is that you don't necessarily have to come up with some earth-shattering idea to get you going in the knowledge business. You can just review what is already known and then come up with a new package of some fresh slant, and people will respond. In fact, when you're selling knowledge, you don't actually want to be too far away from the run of the mill, for if you're too far out, people don't understand what the hell it is you're trying to sell them. Now, if knowledge is not your game, perhaps you are a merchant at heart, then product is the way to go. Of course, the fun of selling products is that there is no real limit of to how many you can sell. Once you have a successful product in the market, you just produce it over and over and sell it to more and more people. What's nice about that is that you don't get paid according to how much you do work, but rather you earn through markup. And so you enter into an energy for which there is no limit. The trick to buying and selling products is that you've got to choose something that you're interested in. Pick things that you truly love. For if you find yourself selling something that you have no interest in, sooner or later your motivation begins to fade. The negativity and struggle of the marketplace will begin to get you down, and eventually you won't sell enough of the item to grant you a decent living. Everything will drift into an endless spiral of lousy and getting lousier. So if you sell plastic toilet seats that play the theme of the bridge over the River Kwai, when the customer sits down, you have to love that sound. As soon as you hear the whistling of the Kono Bogie March, your whole aura has to glitter with awe and inspiration so that you're wandering around the showroom like Tinkerbell. Otherwise, the seats become humdrum, and the selling of them becomes just a way of earning a living, the drabness of which will rot your brain. Of course, toilet seats may not be your chosen field, but that is irrelevant. Someone will do it and do it well. Let me tell you about a certain English gent called Thomas Crapper. Old Tom lived sometime in the last century in the mid 1850s. Old Mr. Crapper manufactured and distributed toilet bowls known as water closets in those days, which became all the rage in the Victorian England era. So much so that the shortened version of Tom's last name became slang for bowel movement. Thomas Crapper has stamped his name upon a fledgling industry, so much so that his product and his name became generic. Over 100 years later, the company that bears his name still trades in the same business, providing a range of toilet fixtures for discerning customers worldwide. For every old sock, there is a shoe. All you have to do is find a niche for yourself, put a touch of class into your efforts, and away you go. By loving your product, you impart a bit of yourself to every item you offer. It takes a life of its own and you shaped. When people buy it, they buy a part of you. It is as if in carrying away that item, they carry with them a memento or feeling that they treasure. Have you ever wondered why holiday souvenirs sell so well, even though they're so cheap and shoddy? It's because the souvenir is imbued by the customer with the emotional memories of a happy time. So instead of being this grotesque plastic bowl standing in an ashtray, it becomes a symbol of positive, carefree days, a holiday romance, perhaps. Now you can do the plastic bowl routine on anything you've got. You just have to have mentally project yourself into it. This can be a conscious meditation type of thing or an unconscious energy that you give your product because you care for it and love it. I know a sleazy character of dubious repute who runs a health food store in California. If you are in tune when you walk into his store, he'll be out. But aside from that, I learned two very interesting merchandising features from this fellow. In addition, meeting this man reminded me of one of those important facts of life, namely that even though someone may be two-thirds or four-fifths revolting, everyone has redeeming features and everyone teaches us something. If nothing else, they offer you a lesson that helps you recognize and remember what types of energy make you throw up. Anyway, what's interesting about his store is that the music played in the shop is classical rather than new age, and it's played very, very loud. This tweaks your attention as you walk in, for most new age stores play that alkaline twinkle twinkle music that sounds like three dogs piddling in a tin. In contrast, his rousing music has a way of sparking you up, calling you to action, which helps sales. Further, I noticed that every so often he would go around and touch each and every item in the place. He especially cared to touch and turn all items that were on sale or with which he has stuck. He explained that within a few days of touching an item and caring for it, he invariably sold it. By injecting your products with your energy, you change them. Years ago, traveling in the Western United States, I came upon a shop that sold household ornaments, porcelain figures, stained glass, potpourri, that kind of stuff. What was interesting about this operation was that the shop was so well laid out. It had such a magical atmosphere that everyone wanted to go into it just to look around. So the owner charged people just to enter the store. What a fascinating idea and very metaphysical. If you can get a buck, say, from everyone who enters your store, you then have no emotion about whether you sell your products or not, for you can make 30,000 a month and sell nothing. In fact, everything you have in the store could be nailed down. Why do you care? Or why would you care? Once you have no emotion about selling or not selling, you detach. As your feelings detach, that creates an energy vacuum around you that naturally pulls people in. And because you are not involved mentally in the selling or not selling of things, the customer is more relaxed. He or she can savor the magic of your store without pressure. Thus, the customer is captivated by the energy of the place and actually buys twice as much, whether he or she wants the item sold or not. So you sell the magic, not the item. I went back to the store many times, mainly to understand the system. I noticed that many of the customers were holiday makers. They would pay their entrance fee and wander in, having no particular purpose in mind. Doing so, they would enter into a kind of meditational rapture that was created by the perfume, the music, and the fairy-like atmosphere of the place. The items on offer were incredibly unusual. They were definitely not the kinds of things that would make you get up in the morning and say, "We need a 2 foot high porcelain egg, or our life won't work." Yet there you are walking out of the store hauling a $600 ceramic egg back to Detroit without even knowing why you got it. And your husband says, "What the hell do we need this egg for?" You reply, "I don't know. It was the magic of the place that got me. I wanted to carry some of that back home with me, so I bought this egg." And your old man shrugs and thinks, "We've been goosed." I never met the owner of the store, but there were two things I knew about him. First, he was a living master in the subtle art of selling the sizzle, not the steak. Second, he was an expert in his chosen field. He knew his product. The point to remember about selling things is that, as well as creating an atmosphere and excitement around your products, you've got to know what you're selling and you have to know the business. It is vital to invest in becoming an expert in your chosen product. People need information in order to make buying decisions. And the more information you can offer, especially if you can offer that information in an impartial way, the more people will respond. Trust develops and they come back time and time again. Remember that as a merchant selling a manufactured good or some type of special service, you will always be a little despised and distrusted. This is because merchants have always been looked down upon as profiteering tricksters. Yet, if you think about it, you could get by without most of the skills, and you could certainly get by without most of the knowledge if you had to. But let the world try to manage without the products. 3 weeks without gas, beer, light bulbs, or whatever, and the whole place would unravel pronto. Personally, I think the merchant's life is an honorable one. I can see a goodness in working to provide mankind with the things it needs. The fact that the salesmen and merchants are looked down upon is a throwback to the olden days. The aristocracy felt it was beneath them to trade, to have to trade or to do work. The intelligentsia and the clergy were happy to rest with the ruminations of the mind, so that left the merchants to provide the people. Entrepreneurs were considered social outcasts and only one rung up the ladder from the peasantry, who were the lowest of the low. Eventually, the aristocracy ran out of money. The intelligentsia was above making any, and the clergy were sustained by maneuvering the people, so they had little or no need to produce anything in particular. One day, everyone looked up to realize that the merchants owned the world, that won them little respect but lots of freedom. For now, they had the clout to buy themselves out of the manipulations and restrictions of life. I like merchants, especially ones who know what they're doing, ones who serve by being experts in their field. The very fact that they involve themselves in aspect of life in which have no interest shows me to concentrate on things that do interest me. Personally, hardware stores make me queasy. There is something about those little green boxes and those oily little pieces of paper that I've never been able to relate to. Perhaps my lack of dexterity is the issue here, for I have the mechanical aptitude of a tadpole. I never know what I'm doing in one of those stores, which creates a feeling of helplessness. You go in and say, "Listen, I need this thing to stick this diddly in my bathroom." And the assistant says, "Well, do you want the multi-swivel toggle flang with the reverse thread or the right hand thread?" And you don't know the answer to that stuff. Isn't it a joy when you meet someone who works in the store and who knows all the stuff about diddlies and flangs, and he tells you what you need to know and helps you choose the right one? You feel assured. The fact that you are manually spastic, that you need a run up just to knock a nail in a wall, slips from your memory, and you imagine yourself to be one of the pyramid builders of yesteryear. Dollar Dance Concept 10. In order to successfully serve people, you have to physiologically get underneath them, which means that you are serving, that while you are serving them, you have to subjugate your ego to their needs long enough to take their money away. The trick, of course, whether you are selling a skill, knowledge, a product, or even a combination of all three, is quality and service. There is little to say about quality except put it in there, lots of it. People buy it over and over. Now, here's the trick to service it's subtle, but if you don't learn it and learn it well, it will stand you in a good stead for many a profitable year to come. First, most people haven't a clue about how to serve for being a servant is not fashionable nowadays. Everyone wants to exert their personality and independence. So you go into a restaurant and you witness a waitress comes over, and instead of her concentrating on your every wish and whim, she begins by talking about herself. Hi, I'm Maisie. I've got to tell you, I just finished a course in transcendental meditation. I can tell you how much that has helped me with my PMS. My orgasms are all straightened out last year. Top of that, my boyfriend is taking me to Maui in a week or two. Have you ever been to Maui? And you're sitting there thinking, what am I, a brick wall, a psychiatrist, a bloody travel brochure? I only come here for the eggs and the slice of toast. What's all this PMS and orgasms and Maui stuff? The point here is that in order to serve people, you have to psychologically get underneath them. This does not mean that you are less than those you serve. It just means that while you are serving them, you have to subjugate your ego and your personality to their needs. That is difficult for most people because they need to feel that they are above the customer or at very least equal to the customer. But who is above or below? Who is more clever or more rich is irrelevant to the transaction. By getting underneath, keeping silent, and concentrating on the customer's needs, you give of yourself. The customer feels that the transfer of energy and they respond. Learning to serve is one of the great money making tricks in life. You subjugate your anxiety, your anguish, and your needs in favor of the customers long enough to do the deal. In serving, there is a pleasure of doing things well. You learn humility and make loads of money. I was a fancy, I was in a fancy hotel in Washington, D.C., waiting to give a seminar. I ordered a Perrier from the waiter, and by chance he said to me, what is the secret to getting tips? Some days I do fairly well, other days I flop. I told the lad about subjugating his ego. He got it, but not totally. So he asked me to give him an example of what I meant. I said to him, imagine a man and his wife coming into your bar. Why are they here? First and foremost, life scares people. Most wander around in various states of unholy terror all of the time. Your customer enters this tranquil and elegant bar for a respite from that terror. He needs to get away, to relax, to have a stable, settled moment in which to refresh himself before heading back into the battle of things. As he enters, approach him immediately. Say nothing other than, good morning, sir. How can I help you? When he orders, listen. Speak only about his needs unless spoken to. Let's say your customer wants a vodka and tonic. Ask him, would you like ice, sir? A twist of lemon, perhaps? An extra napkin? A bowl of nuts? What can I do for you? Can I get you an extra cushion? Would you like the morning paper? What would your lady like? Tomato juice, orange juice, a list of the local hairdressers. Can I take your canary for a walk while you are sitting here? In other words, the waiter has to come from a place of concentration, subjugation, and complete limitless service. Nothing is too much trouble. The customer is always right, even when he is wrong. There is no limit to what you will do to serve while that person is in your bar and in your care. The young lad got the message, and I left to give my seminar. 4 hours later, I returned. The same waiter came over to me beaming, glowing with excitement. He was fantastic, he said. I did what you said. I concentrated on getting underneath my customers. I can hardly believe it. Until now, my record for a 4 hour shift was $42 in tips. This shift, I made $162. One man alone tipped me $40. To serve is honorable, but it is also crafty. There is the hard way in life where you feel unsure of yourself, so you have to project a feeling, a seeking of people's affection and approval. And then there is the easy way. You feel good about yourself. You can serve in silence without it affecting your self-image. You feel proud to serve and you do a good job. You need no acknowledgement, for you have granted that acknowledgement to yourself in advance, in silence. You want nothing for yourself, and in wanting nothing other than to serve your customer, you get everything and more. Life is simple. Mostly it's a matter of going in the opposite direction of the average twit, nothing more. Years ago, I had a partner named David. We worked as jobbers in the clothing industry. Our function was to go around to factories and buy up seconds, slightly irregular clothing, end of the line garments, and so forth. The name of that game is to give the factory as little as possible for the items so that no matter how horrible the clothing is, you can at least make a profit on some of it and then junk the rest at a break even or better. We walked into this fellow's office one day and I started talking about the deal. As I did so, David, who was a large man, over 200 pounds, lay down on the floor in front of the man's desk. I tried to take no notice, but David's huge frame lying there like Moby Dick was hard to ignore. A few moments later, I joined him on the carpet. Somehow it seemed the right thing to do. We both negotiated from ground zero, more or less, under the factory owner's desk. We did the deal and hauled out of the parking lot. Once there, I asked David what the hell was going on, and he explained to me that the subtle art of negotiating is to get underneath the seller and sustain a non-threatening position. You can't get uptight about two loonies who are lying on your carpet. Ironically, we did a hell of a deal that day. The factory had a whole pile of jeans with crooked seams. The outside seam of those jeans started at waist and gradually curved around the knee to finish up as an additional inside seam that defied any rational explanation. We bought the job lot, chopped off the offending lower legs, and sold the finished items as denim shorts. Bingo, there's no limit to the creative mind. Chapter 8: Originality, the recipe for easy money. As you think in terms of what you're going to sell them, I think we ought to discuss originality for a moment, for it's in your recipe for easy money. Very little out there is original, yet if people find something truly unusual, providing it works okay, they flock to be a part of it. Look at Disneyland. There are theme parks all over the world, but Disneyland stands out. People travel thousands of miles just to spend a few hours there. Have you ever noticed that many things are not built for the convenience of the user? It seems that often people's needs are irrelevant to the manufacturer's design decisions. For example, how often have you seen a bath faucet that you can operate with your feet? It stands to reason that you are not going to want to get out of a warm bath to reach for the other end to turn off the tap. Yet somehow, almost every bath in the world has a knobby handle that's awkward to operate and miles away. It's hard enough to turn the knob with a soapy hand, but with your feet, forget it. A contortionist would have trouble. The first guy who comes up with a foot operated bath faucet will be an instant millionaire. When I look at things that don't work well, it excites me. I see the glimmer of easy money. Over the last few years, I have flown around a lot, the equivalent of 83 times around the world. I have noticed that airlines are packed with examples of things that don't emotionally work for the customer. The point about flying is that the customer doesn't give a damn whom he or she flies with, providing they get there. The problem is that many of the airlines nowadays are tossing the customers out at sea or banging them into the tarmac. PR wise, this goes down like a brick balloon. When I get on a plane that's oily and dirty, it creates instant concern. For my mind naturally wonders if all the bits and bobs are working. Continental Airlines in the US is a good example of this. For some reason that I don't understand, they oil their aircraft before each day's commerce. With so much oil external to the craft, it naturally makes me wonder if there's any in the engine. What would it take to wash those planes once a week? Not much. How many customers do the airlines lose because folks take poorly to flying in a garbage bag? Another thing I noticed about Continental Airlines is that they have the word caca stamped on their silverware. No doubt the logo stands for something logical like Continental Airlines Catering Administration or whatever, but caca to most people means shit. I'd love to see the genius at Continental who's getting 100,000 a year to print caca on the spoons. Anyway, once comfortably crammed into your seat, the next performance is the hostess safety routine. The sight of that young lady waving that plastic card rattles me enormously. You know that she's doing her very best, but she waves her arms, positioning to the doors and exits. You look at the 300-pound passenger who's jamming the aisle, and you know you'll never make it. Next, on goes the yellow life jacket, which serves to remind you of some rotten possibilities. But take heart, there's a whistle on the jacket, they tell you. Now, if you're bobbing about in the dark 600 miles east of Fiji, you can at least whistle some happy little tune to cheer you up. As the hostess up front continues her pantomime, you casually look down at your feet at the little screw that bolts the seats in front of you to the floor. The screw is about the size of the nail on your finger. What is particularly disturbing about that little screw is, first, its size, and second, the realization that an exact replica of that same screw is all that is holding the seat to the floor. Meanwhile, the young lady up front is ceremoniously clicking the belt buckle in and out, and you naturally wonder, in the event of the plane hitting something unusual, what earthly good would the belt do for you? Next time you fly, take a look at that screw. Perhaps you get a piece of paper and a pencil and make a rubbing of it. When you get home, you'll notice that the screw is about the same size as the one that holds the fridge door on, and your fridge is likely to be hurtling around 400 miles an hour. Your fridge is unlikely to be hurling around at 400 miles an hour. In the event of an emergency, the airline tells you to take off your shoes, bend over, and grab your ankles. The logic of that completely escapes me. If you're going to be flying through the cabin with a seat strapped to your backside, the last thing you want to do is look silly. I finally concluded that the reason they want you hurling about with your head between your knees is that this is the handy position for kissing your ass goodbye. What would it take to put a decent screw on the floor? Pennies. Are they going to do it? Probably not. It's hard to say to someone, be original. It's like saying, be a great singer. Either they can sing or they can't. Yet there are ways of thinking through the presentation of your service, or even the presentation of yourself that is fresh and unusual, so that it stimulates people's attention. Often, that is the only matter of thinking through what others might want and trying your best to provide that. Just a slight touch is all it takes. For example, certain restaurants nowadays pack out the room with plants and flowers. I don't mean the odd arrangement here and there. They make the flowers a part of the atmosphere. They are literally hundreds of hanging baskets, trees, and so forth all over the joint. I've never gone into that type of restaurant when it has not been busy. People like plants and flowers. The energy they give off is fresh and clean and rejuvenating, which is why they go into a restaurant in the first place. Sometimes your originality can be just to not do what all the others do. For example, how many times have you been to a restaurant where the waiters or waitresses look as if they haven't washed for a month or two? You take on one look at those characters and their demeanor automatically sets up a tension within you. Looking down at your soup spoon, you think, lick this and die. Perhaps your originality could be that everything in your restaurant is absolutely spotless all of the time. Personally, I like things that are a bit bizarre. I love to set up scenarios that no one understands. In fact, using bizarre images is often good merchandising for people's imagination because their memory is stimulated. The Heineken beer campaign that runs in Europe for many years is one of the most successful ever devised. The caption reads, Heineken refreshes the parts that other beer cannot reach. The graphic is usually some bizarre scene of a guy with a flowering bush coming out of his head. No one has a clue as to what the ad means, but everyone remembers them. In Western Canada, there is a small brewery that makes a beer called Kokanee. In their TV commercials, they have a dog called Brew. The dog is owned by friends of mine. In the ad, the dog catches a taxi to the liquor store and then heads over the hill and dale to bring a six-pack of Kokanee beer back to his TV owner, who is camped in the forest. The image is emotive and funny. In less than a year, Kokanee went from being an obscure little brewery to being a household name in Canada. Originality allows you to stand out from the crowd. In America, the citizens are bombarded by 600 or more advertising messages per day. What you offer could be fantastic, but how will you position it out and away from the pack? A bit of originality at the front and saves you a fortune later on. It's an expensive drag to try to haul a dull product into the minds of the public. I have this idea for a restaurant in which there would be a large pit just inside the front door. In the pit, I toss a few alligators, big ones, with large teeth and open mouths. Then I'd build a bridge over that pit. All my customers would have to cross it in order to get to the tables. I'd make the bridge a little rickety. Not too much so, but just enough to get people thinking. Next, I hired a fellow from the zoo to figure out how high an alligator can jump on its best shot. I'd pitch my bridge a few inches higher than the best the gators could hope for. People would flock from miles around just to get over the alligator pit. As they'd come in, they'd ask, isn't it dangerous? Yeah, we lose a few a day, I'd say. but the rest are really real hungry when they get to the other side. What would it cost to buy a few alligators? A few grand, perhaps? Maybe you could have the alligator pit running throughout the restaurant. The customers would love to toss their bread rolls into the pit and watch them disappear in one go. Subliminally, the idea is terrific. What better symbol for eating than an alligator with its jaw open, chomping on stuff inches from your leg? People would come to eat there even if the food were lousy, just for the action. There's something interesting going on. You could charge what you liked. Every so often, you could fake it a little and throw a dummy in the water without anyone knowing. The commotion would catch people's attention and quicken their adrenals, increasing their appetite. What's happening? They'd ask. Oh, nothing much. We've just lost the wine waiter. That's the third this month. When you think of all the money people spend decorating restaurants and what you get is all chrome and glass and boring for the most part, all you have to do is hang half a dozen boa constrictors off the fans and away you go. Things have to be interesting in order to get people's attention. They want to learn something. They want to be challenged in some way or just involved. Engage people whenever you have them be a part of the act, so to speak. They love it. If you own a photocopying store, you're thinking, how do I make photocopying original and interesting? There is always a way. Stick one of your old photocopiers on the ceiling. When people come in and want to photocopy, point upwards and let them figure out for a moment or two. When they ask the obvious question, why is the machine on the ceiling? Tell them you figured out that you were paying rent for the ceiling, so it makes the business more cost effective. You stuck the machine up there. How many copies would you like, sir? Personally, I think if things are lighthearted and amusing, people respond. Now, you can't have the bank manager dressed up in a clown outfit, for in the area of finances, people are really serious. It's too much of a survival issue to make fun of. Old man Rockefeller once said, making money is a serious business. He must have known he had more money than God. So, in dealing with TikTok on the subject of money, you've got to be straight, but everything else can have a sense of loony to it. I have this idea for a doctor's office. Going to the doctor's surgery is no picnic. The best part is leaving. There's nothing like the exhilaration of crossing the car parked on the way out, kicking your heels, knowing that you aren't going to croak it for a while yet. Anyway, all the rest of the experience is a complete drag. Attention. How do you make fun of it? Put a little theater into it. The patient would come in and lie on the couch. The doctor would examine the patient. Near the couch would be a little mouse running around and round on a wheel. On each rung of the wheel would be a kind of drug or treatment. Once the doctor had finished his examination, he'd say to the mouse, what do you think? The mouse sets off, trotting to the wheel, and whenever it stops, the doctor reads off the prescription. There's the mouse wobbling around on the wheel after its little run, and the doctor leans over and says to the patient, ah, yes, it says here, what you really need is 100 milligrams of toxyproxy tetracline. Now, this would engage the client's interest. How does the mouse know where to stop? Asked the patient. Oh, he's highly qualified, says the doctor. Amazing, says the patient. I've never seen it done that way. Of course, the patient lying down on the couch would not be able to read each rung of the wheel as it hurtled past, so the doctor could fake it and make sure the patient got the right stuff. But it would be great. Eventually, the mouse would become famous. People in perfect health would roll up for an examination at the docks just to see the mouse operate its routine. Anyway, if you don't like the idea, I've got another. What about an insurance salesman who goes door to door on an elephant? People like their insurance companies to be rock solid. What's more rock solid than a 2-ton elephant? In the end, it all comes down to enthusiasm. Your creativity is basically your expression of God force. There's nothing more marvelous than doing something you love to do and getting paid for it. It ceases to become work, money, and effort, and it becomes fun, your expression of the joy of life. My idea has always been to make everything you do into a game. Now, people might say that this is childlike, but what do you care as long as you can count to 1 million and are having fun? In a world where everyone is so bloody serious, we need a few confident, lighthearted loonies to keep things moving along. Anyway, when a person is really serious about life, what he or she is usually saying is, I can't cope. It's all too overwhelming. One feels insecure. You can see this in offices where some immature little boy is placed in the position of manager. The uptight twit starts making life a misery for everyone because he feels unsure of himself. If you work for one of those cardboard cutouts, roll into work tomorrow with a large lemon meringue pie and say, good morning, sir. Are you Good morning, sir, in your most serious tone, then smash the idiot in the mouth with the pie. Of course, that may wind up being your last creative effort for the firm, but it's better that you go somewhere else and live and work with people who are happy and alive, rather than putting your efforts into supporting an acid bath. Chapter 9: The Force of Your Will Projected. The quality of your concerted action in the marketplace is really dominated by the force or lack thereof of your intention. Most people think that intention just means saying, I'll do my best. When people say that to me, I run a mile, I'll do my best. It's the mind's way of saying, I'll trot out there and play around doing busy work for an hour or two. And when the project doesn't succeed or realize its full potential, I'll be okay because I have my excuse already pinned on the wall. Your mind is your best friend, but it's also an enemy, not only because it has a vested interest in limiting what you believe you can do, but also because it has a way of selling you short. Isn't it interesting that whenever a group of people set out to develop a project, that project usually falls short of everyone's expectations? In real life, things never quite pan out the way one thinks they ought to, why is that? Because the ego personality is happy to spend 4 hours in a meeting talking about building apartments on the beach, but it isn't at all spending 8 hours actually hauling cement or delivering sales pitches to prospective buyers. Imagination and concerted action live in different neighborhoods. So as you set out with a little battle plan, be careful to analyze beforehand what your intention is. If it is wishy washy, the realities of life will have a way of making sure your project doesn't work. Your intention has to be at the forefront of your thinking and has to be followed by timely action, which is appropriate to deliver that intention. You see, you can wander out into the lot and say to yourself, I hope I'll sell a couple cars today. Or you can arrive at work 15 minutes early, organize your desk, get your brochures and order forms ready, sharpen your pencil, and say to yourself, I expect to sell 6 more cars. Nothing less is acceptable. The other salesman might say that 6 cars a day is impossible, for it takes an average of 2 hours to sell a car. So the most you might hope for is, say, 4 cars in a day, not six, but they are coming from a place of selling one car to one person, for that is what is normal for them. But you are coming from intention, which has no opinion of how many cars you might sell to whom or how long it might take. It just says 6 cars or more. So you sell 2 cars by lunchtime, and then nothing happens for 3 hours. Then a fellow wanders in and asks, how much is that Rolls Royce? You say, $120,000 and change, sir. And he says, I'll take four, one pink, one blue, and two green. So you see, there is TikTok and then there is intention. In TikTok, any old excuse is fine as long as you don't have to deliver. Intention says, no limit here. Nothing can stop me. I feel it. I see it in my mind's eye. I have focused will. And as the laser beam of my intent, I am involved. I persist. Nothing is too much trouble. My intention has to be delivered, for I insist on it. I won't quit until it is. Of course, on some days, circumstances go against you. In spite of your readiness and high intention, it peels down rain all day, and you don't sell 6 cars. However, you were ready and you were open. If anyone had walked into the showroom with even half an inclination, they would have gone out without they would have gone out with one of your cars. And that is all that matters. For when the force of your will is honed and you are consistent in your actions, life eventually has to deliver you what it is you want. Dollar Dance Concept 11. On your quest to think of the symbology of the woodpecker, each peck does not amount to much, but eventually the whole bloody tree comes down. Persistence and patience are the keys to intention, but for that to work, you have to be able to focus and concentrate on the target. Most people quit before the final payout, which is sad, but that's life. I was in a silver mine where the old miners had dug and dug for years and found only a trickle of silver here and there. When they finally quit digging and they were just 12 feet from a multi-million dollar mother lode, the modern owner of the mine was happy with that. He moved the diggers over a couple yards or so, and bingo. I have always been keen on the philosophy of the ancient Mongols. What we learned from those guys, like it or not, is intention. When the lads set out to get somewhere, they arrived. They didn't so much conquer the land, they rolled it up and took it with them. The Mongols were brilliant organizers. In fact, their word orda gave rise to the word order. What we learn from them is their ability to stick to the project no matter what. They could ride in anguish and pain. Conditions were irrelevant to them. The intent was the only thing that mattered. So often we expect things in life to be cozy and guaranteed. We demand that things in happen in a certain format or a predetermined way. Otherwise, we deem them to have failed. You can have all the intention in the world, but sometimes things arrive from a different direction. What you're looking to do with an intent is to focus on the target and never let go, no matter how long it takes. The great fortunes of the world were never built overnight. Things take time, and you have to be able to wait. If you are no good at waiting, start learning how. Being able to outwait the opposition is another of the great secrets of life. It is very Taoist, and it is also very crafty. When you know that all the world is in a rush, all you have to do is hold the other view. I like the symbology of the woodpecker. Each peck does not amount to much, but eventually the whole bloody tree comes down. As you focus on your target, take woodpecker with you. It'll become a good friend. By holding the overall plan in your mind and concentrating on the pecking, you will eventually get what you want. When you think about it, what's the rush? If you are balanced, there is none. If you are not balanced, the rush in itself will push what you want away from you. One step at a time, force yourself to pause and take stock, to rebuild and then head out again. What I learned from the European occultists is that the greatest power available to us humans is our will when projected correctly. Now you probably haven't thought much in terms of the power of your will, but it is this same power that the ancient magicians used to create supernatural events in their lives. The difference between will and intention is that for many people, intention is just a mental act, a kind of wishful thinking. Whereas the force of will projected from your consciousness contains not only your thoughts and desires, but also the enthusiasm of your life force. Your will, projected correctly, will contain that vital ingredient. Your spirit will very your spirit, the very essence of what you are. The force of that spirit, clearly defined, will deliver to you the focus of your will by virtue of the fact that the clarity of its concentration is honed to such an uncluttered purity that it cuts right through reality and fires the full weight of its power upon any target. Remember that your consciousness is contained in a sea of consciousness, which is basically all the energy and thought forms of the world around you. For the most part, the energy of the people around you will be weak and ill-defined. What little power they have is often undetermined by emotion. In the pea soup of mumbling and grumbling, along comes the magician, powerful, clear, and cluttered by yearnings or fanciful ramblings of the imagination. Detached as he is from the emotions of humanity, he stands on a launch platform that is already a rung or two higher than the crowd. From there, he fires his will into the circumstances of life, knowing that his power is unstoppable. How could the universal law of life deny this man? It can't. His power is too great. His will is uncluttered by any thought of deserving, of good and bad, or having or not having. It is focused solely on what he wants. His desire is not delivered because of any higher selection process. Rather, it comes to him solely through the force of his demand. It is because he wants it, because that thought is laced in his will, empowered by the very spirit of his being, that it cannot be denied him. When first confronted by this idea, I had a natural reaction against the aggression needed to reach that certain level of intent. It seemed to me that somehow it was wrong to harness one's power in occult terms, to force life to hand over one's every wish and whim. But gradually, I got used to the idea and developed a theory of mortality around my particular method. Soon I realized that what was important to me were my achievements, the things that I knew I had to complete in this lifetime. How I got those things, providing I did not infringe on others, was irrelevant. The points to consider are: what do we want and how much energy are you prepared to exert to get what you want? If the level of enthusiasm you are willing to commit to your quest is not great, then obviously you don't want what you think you do. Or at best, your quest is not that important to you. But if some aspect is very, very special to you, it becomes sacred by virtue of its integrity. Then the level of your commitment to that ideal is vital. for you know that the whole reason for your life is contained and centered in that one quest or achievement. If this is so, you are required by its very sacredness to exert every fiber of your being through physical effort, mental acuity, or occult power to deliver the focus of your intent. Somewhere in your life, there will be an overriding theme to your quest, some part of your desire that cannot be denied without a terrible cost to the very essence of what you are. Are you going to ignore it, or do you have the courage of your commitment and the confidence to demand that life? Humanity or circumstances give you what you want with no other excuse, reason, or apology other than that you demand it. If the level of your intention is thus you have gripped the idea of the force of will, if, however, your commitment is less than powerful, life will not give you what you want, for it has no concern for your well being. Neither does it have a knowledge of your wants. The only way is for you to indicate your desire, hold it in the forefront of your thoughts, and aggressively demand, better still, insist that life deliver. Some might have some might say that this is not spiritual, that it feels like ripping a plaque off a museum wall. Perhaps in certain circumstances that is true. But does it follow that while you demand certain things of life, you should also fail to be a kind and loving person? No, it does not. All it says is that in one or two areas of your life, you will not compromise. Rather, it seems to me that your life would lack spiritual definition if, while realizing that some particular aspect of your quest was vital, you nevertheless failed to exert the full pressure of your intent in seeking that vital aspect. You might look back at your life and see this kind of generous and loving person who was totally wimpy when asking his or her needs be met. You would see that you had indeed learned to love others, but in doing so, had all the world to walk all over you. You had failed to materialize your dreams because of your self-depreciating attitude. In loving the world, you forgot to love yourself. So half the lesson is learned, and the other half remains to be handled at some later date, perhaps. What a drag. The constant problem of the force of will when projected is that the question of what an infringement is. For example, if you were to fire a thought into the mind of another, forcing that person to have sex with you against their will, that would be an infringement, for the manipulation required to achieve your desire is too intense. But what if the power of your will, the energy that is collected around you, is so overwhelmingly forceful that it creates in another the overriding urge to be with you, to do so, to do absolutely anything to be in your company? When that person approaches you and says, I will do anything to be with you, you might say, fine, but the condition I place in granting your request is that I require you to have sex with me every second Thursday. That to me is not an infringement, for you have the right to demand for yourself whatever is reasonable. The fact that the person in front of you has an overwhelming emotional need to be with you does not mean that you are required to fulfill that need. Neither does it mean that you should have to acquiesce to their wishes without getting something in return. To some, sex every second Thursday would be a small inconvenience compared with the perceived benefit of you allowing them to hang out with you. Your will not you will not know until you ask whether or not they would consider your request reasonable. But either way, you have been clear and you have communicated your terms, and they can decide one way or another. As you project the force of your will into life, it creates awkward situations for people through its unusual power, for it forces them to evaluate their needs in light of yours. It is natural for people to expect you to share your energy or knowledge or physical self free of charge and regardless of whether or not it is convenient to you. There is a tendency for us to feel that we have to give constantly. This is not necessarily so, for you are an individual and you too have needs. Yet, when your will is clear, strong, and focused, people will tend to bump up against it. It forces them to accept terms that they may have not considered before. Perhaps they feel that you ought to hang out with them and spend your time on them free of charge. It's natural for people to expect things from you for nothing, for you have offered it in the past. Why would they pay or trade if they do not have to? Yet, when something costs nothing, it usually means that the individual considers it valueless. If then hanging out with you is valueless to them, why would you mess with wasting your time on it? The subtle point here is for you to make sure that your will does not force others into actions that offend their morality. even if their morality is a bit silly or is against their will. As long as you offer them an exit, they are free to choose. And if sex every second Thursday is not agreeable to them, they can always refuse or come back with an alternative offer. When I saw among the European occultists what was, for the most part, their magical practices were a lot of hocus pocus. In any method, the proof of the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And what I saw were a lot of scruffy little fellows waffling on about their power of their magic, while in reality they didn't have two beans to rub together. Then, again, from time to time, I met a real pro, someone who was wealthy, powerful, and successful. But those characters were very secretive, and it was hard to eke the methodology from them. One day, I was a guest at lunch in a fancy restaurant while one of those hairy little characters was entertaining his banker. The occultist ordered a bottle of De Quem, which impressed me because De Quem is one of the finest and most expensive white wines in the world. As food was served and the conversation drifted back and forth, I could see that the occultist was messing with the banker's mind. It wasn't long before he flipped the banker with a blanket of energy that contained a ferocious amount of the occultist's power and all of his will. The flip consisted of a thought form thrown from the area of the heart over the banker's head, like a blanket. The energy of the thought form projected, thus a gray blue in color. Its power is defined by the force of one's will and the clarity of one's intent. The banker reacted by leaning back from the table and affecting a somewhat disconnected and gazed look in his eyes. He lost his concentration and stumbled on his words. He knocked a roll to the floor. It seemed to me that his ability to resist was shot away. In the next 2 minutes, the hairy little occultist got to the banker to commit to an unsecured $300,000 loan. Some months later, by which time I was living in America, the banker called me from Europe, complaining that the hairy little fellow had hightailed with his cash. A fairly predictable course of events, I thought. The strange thing was that although the occultist was crooked in the normal definition of things, he never considered himself a thief. He believed in his powers so totally, and he had a right to, that he considered his presence a gift to the world. This was an opinion that was confirmed by almost all people who met him. People were delighted to give him their money, and during the period I hung out with him, I saw him unhinge people from their loot to the tune of $2.5 million or thereabouts. When parting with their cash, no one seemed to complain. It was only later, when he was no longer on the scene and the donors were no longer influenced by his power, that everyone had second thoughts. Crook or not, he was, in a strange way, the most spiritual person I had ever met, for he was truly himself, an individual. And like it or not, he had a methodology, a rule, a code that he lived by. The force of his will demanded that life support him on the level to which he had become accustomed, and people responded willingly. He, in turn, was a very generous person. He would give you the shirt off his back, and he considered his supply of abundance limitless. He never for a moment thought that there could be the slightest possibility of his running out. If he made any mistake, it was that when people were gaga over his energy, he let them abandon their will to his. If he had tempered this somewhat and taken a little here and a little there, no one would have reacted. But the fellow got a bit carried away by his ego, and he began to believe that the higher powers had chosen him for some great mission that might well change the destiny of the world. Naturally, to be burdened with such a karmic obligation would call for massive amounts of other people's money in order to deliver a plan acceptable to the gods. So rather than taking the odd 5 or 10,000, he would hit people with up to he would hit people up for 100 grand or whatever he could get. One idiot, a rancher from Oregon, handed over 700K. Well, as the sums of money got bigger, the folk involved got more intense about getting their cash back. For a while, there was a whole little team along with the fraud squad out looking for the fellow. But our little gnome was much too fast on his feet. With the passage of time, people's anger subsided and they accepted their losses as investments, the kind we all line up for as we learn the game of life. The point is, if your intention is forceful and your will is clearly defined, people lined up to give you what you want. You have to have confidence in yourself. You have to be able to believe in your own power. If you have the slightest doubt about your worthiness, it takes you immediately from infinite possibilities to a more sparse resolve. Imagine the tiger in the forest. Does it wonder if the deer on his path is his? Is there any question of the tiger's worthiness being interconnected as all things are? The eternal Tao sustains itself. The little creatures give themselves up to the tiger as nature gave of itself to sustain the creatures. Perfect balance is maintained. The mind creates boundaries that are fake and ungodlike. If you have no real emotion about your possessions, and if you do not cling to life in a desperate way, the Tao emanates from you. Balance is the gift you offer. What then, if in affirming abundance, you come upon a handbag stuffed with cash? Let's say, for argument's sake, that the bag contains no identifying marks. You would have to accept that abundance is a natural extension of your energy, or you would be totally negating your alignment to the infinite. The only thing to watch out for is the danger of going over the top and taking undue advantage of others or getting carried away by the ego. In a world where everyone manipulates or controls everyone else, wouldn't it be nice if you could become a success story without having to resort to the same mucky techniques? It seems to me as that at most we are just custodians of power. We are not the power itself, and we should remember that. When balanced, the power flows spontaneously and confirms to us the pure spirituality of things. But sometimes the energy within one becomes so powerful and so intense that the individual loses all sight of humble mortality and allows himself to be wafted by ego into thinking that somehow he or she is here to fix the world, to become the oracle of the gods or whatever. You can see that nonsense in both the New Age and major religions. The leaders begin to believe themselves to be divinely selected. There is a secondhand card salesman in America who drifted into the guru business and now has two people to walk beside him, lest any of his followers should accidentally touch him and rob him of a few volts of his newfound divinity. What the followers don't know, for the most part, is that their car salesman's guru is gay. He is not averse to allowing some of the lads rob him willy-nilly all night long, if need be. Ah, the the perfidy of the human mind is endless. As you concentrate upon yourself and your life, you will soon become much more powerful than 99% of those with whom you deal. You should take care to temper your energy and not get carried away by the wealth or the position you find yourself in. If you don't watch carefully, it is likely that sooner or later you will self destruct. Or worse still, you might achieve your every wish and whim, but look back on your life and see ugliness. See that you achieved your quest in material terms, but failed to translate those material benefits in an honorable code of living or spiritual essence. That would be sad. In my view, wealth for its very sake is just an ego trip that is driven by the desires to satiate one's survival worries. In its worst form, money is the ego's way of grasping helplessly for its own immortality. That is why the rich, the very rich, build monuments. First, it keeps the ego happy. And second, in the bricks of the mortar, they seek foolishly to perpetuate their own existence. You have to ask yourself, do I sincerely want to be rich? If the answer is yes, then your next question is, what do I want the money for? What will you do if you become loaded? Once these questions are clear in your mind, the target is only a few years away at most. If your quest for wealth is ego oriented, and if at the same time you are trying to develop a spiritual aspect to your life, you will find that your money making attempts will constantly fail. Your inner being will protect you from the possibility of self destruction, from losing sight of your true goal through the temptation of ego. If you have no overall spiritual quest, you will probably make money more quickly, but what you achieve will be empty. You should look into your heart and answer these questions, for all the intention and force of will in the world will be useless to you if you are not happy, or if your conscious mind is diametrically opposed to your inner quest. If one asks, do you sincerely want to be rich? Most people will answer yes, but not many of those answering in the affirmative will actually mean it. They can imagine wealth and a lush lifestyle, but they don't really believe they can have it. Or if they don't believe they are worthy, or they are happy for those fantasies to rest solely in their mind, and they do not actually have the force of intention to go out and get what they want. If you are going to be very rich, you're going to have to agree to take responsibility. and lots of it. You'll have to become particularly involved in life. Getting rich is a hands on process. It involves endless interaction and a certain amount of stress and strain. Is that what you want? It is customary for people to view the rich as living an indolent, carefree life, sipping cocktails at the beach while the chauffeurs purrs at the curbside. This may be true for a few, but most have to go out and create their wealth. Once that wealth is achieved, they have to look after it, invest in it, and even defend if it's somewhat. It takes a massive amount of energy, and you have to look and see if you have that level of energy, or if you are prepared to put in what it takes to develop that flair. If your answer is, yes, I'll do anything, and you sincerely mean it, then you're halfway there. But if you are less than sure, then you should stop and think about it. Perhaps if you look deep into yourself, all you need is just a little more abundance so that you can free up your life a little. Perhaps massive wealth would make you very sick. Maybe a bit extra is all you need. If so, you have to ask yourself why you don't have that already. Why are things tight? The answer will lie deep within you somewhere. You can find that answer and fix the problem quickly as long as you are truthful with yourself. Perhaps you have a fear of commitment, or perhaps you fail to concentrate on things correctly. Or it could be, and this is common, that you have designed a lifestyle that is relatively free. You have never joined the system, but in denying yourself entry into the system, you have had difficulty in getting the very same system to cough up all that you need. Perhaps you have relegated yourself to eking out an existence in a shanty town on the edge of the city rather than committing yourself to entering the mainstream. Many are faced with the same problem, yet sometimes to go beyond, all one has to do is join. Through joining, though joining may not be in your heart, by playing the game, at least you get what you want from the system. Anyway, if all one needs is a little more, it is good to have identified that intention. And now the task is to work toward the goal. It is not hard to develop little money machines that crank out cash once you have intention. And once you are prepared to enter the marketplace and find out what is going on, when you think of it, it doesn't matter how you make the extra cash. You can sell condoms and truck stop toilets if need be, as long as you create that little machine and it gives you the balance you seek. Or perhaps you can fix things simply by making what you do so much better and charging more. The whole trick to money is balance. Balance is 1,000 a month or balance at 1,000,000 a month. The great value of that balance is that it underpins the spiritual you and allows the inner beauty and creativity to come out. That is why, for most people, money is the only lesson, other than love, perhaps, that we are here to learn. You should sit down with your loved ones and really discuss your financial needs so that each of you can define what he or she wants and what each one's level of intention is. Then you can tailor your hopes and dreams to suit your intention. And you can see if the level of your, if this, see if the level of your projected will is going to be strong enough to deliver what it is that you want. If your intention is not really that high, you will have to accept that as fact, and you may have to adjust what you expect from life. Alternatively, you can work on your intention through concentration and discipline to make it stronger. Then, once it's strong, the force of your will projected into life will guarantee the delivery of your heart's desire. Of course, sometimes things are so imbalanced financially that it seems almost impossible to get a fresh start. The problem stems from the fact that nowadays credit is so easy to obtain. When I first came to America, it boggled my mind that you could walk into a store and sign for stuff even though the shop didn't know you from Adam. $1 down and catch us if you can. Dollar Dance Concept 12. If some aspect of your life is very, very special to you, it becomes sacred by virtue of its integrity. Then the level of your commitment to that ideal is vital, for you know that the whole reason for your life is contained and centered in that one quest or achievement. With so much credit, it's easy to see why people get into trouble. If your debt is out of control, you have a dis-ease of finances. That, more than anything else, will cause you imbalance. The emotion about owing money is a surefire way of blocking you from opportunity. Now, if you are in control of your finances, you pay everyone, but if you are way, way out of control, you'll have to lie down in the hospital bed of finances for a while. Otherwise, you will never be healed. You need to rest to pull back. In an imbalanced state, struggling to pay people is the most stupid way of fixing things. It only encourages them to ask for more, and it rattles you, which is no help to the creditors in the end. Retreat is the only answer, of course. It depends on how much you owe. If you're only a little out of control, you can cut back on expenses and pay people off a bit. But let's say you were way over the top. The first move is to admit to yourself. The next is to let your creditors know they ain't getting in anytime soon. Once that is communicated to them clearly, they drop you off the immediate list and you go to the back burner where the emotion is a lot less and you don't have to ferret tugging on your nuts. And you don't have the ferret tugging on your nuts. Your first reaction might be, if I don't pay people, won't that destroy my goodwill and credit? The fact is, mate, your goodwill is already destroyed and your credit sucks. What do you have to lose? Anyway, you are not going to need credit. After all, credit is only a device to satisfy your cravings when you are not able to satisfy them immediately in cash. But what if I lose my credit cards? So what? You don't need credit if you have money. Yes, credit cards are handy when traveling or renting cars. No problem. There are banks that specialize in giving cards to people with lousy credit. The cards are backed by the customer with a savings account at the bank. But if I don't pay my debts, people won't like me anymore. Forget it. Go back to chapter 3 and reread the section on acceptance of self. It is better that you declare bankruptcy than try to sustain a position that is untenable. Then, having made a clean sweep of things, you will have to change the error of your ways. No more credit, or alternatively, small amounts of credit that you can easily handle. If you wipe off the old stuff and then start owing all over again, you have not granted yourself, on an energy level, absolution for the situation because you are engaging in the same old nonsense. Karmically, that would be dishonest, but everyone is entitled to make the odd mistake in life and start again. Your creditors are equally as responsible for your debt situation as you are. There is no innocent victims. They made a business decision to give you credit in the hope of a profit, and you failed them. That happens all the time. Let's say, hypothetically, that you had a credit card for 20 years and you have been paying 19% interest in addition to the annual fees on that card for the length of time. The credit card company knows exactly what percentage of people default on their bills each year. Let's say it is 2%. So the credit company calculates that all their customers will default at least once every 50 years. 2% times 50 equals 100%. That cost is added into the annual interest and the fees that they charge. So for 20 years, you have been paying for your possible default. Why then would you want to disappoint them? If you don't default once every 50 years, you're going to start messing around with their mathematics, and that would cause a panic. When you owe money, people harass you, and that can make you feel like a rotten egg. You forgot, you forget that you are a child of God and immortal and all that good stuff. You tend to get down on yourself and believe all the things your creditors are saying about you. At first, it may seem like they are right and that you are powerless. But in fact, the reverse is the case. The creditors are right, but they are powerless. As a debtor, you are in the driver's seat, and you should never forget that. The emotion lies always with the creditors, and they try to drag the debtor in the same emotional whirlpool. But what if you refuse to be rattled? The fact that you owe someone money and can't pay is no reason for you to be upset. Nothing serious can really happen. If you have assets, the creditor can chase after those assets. Good luck to him. And if you have no assets, you're home free. In addition, time is usually on your side. Having incurred a loss, the creditor can only invest a certain amount of his energy in flogging a dead horse. In the end, he realizes that his time is better spent elsewhere on more profitable ventures. With the passage of time, debts heal themselves. Finally, in any transaction, there is a cost of the transaction and the hoped for profit. The initial cost is real, but the hope for profit is a thought form. As a debtor, this gives you additional leverage. Business people hate to lose their initial outlay because those dollars are then lost forever and cannot be used to generate additional business in the future. But often they are prepared to lose or to not make the profit they had hoped for. This enables you to do deals to settle your debts by paying only a percentage of what you owe. Further, you have the possibility of not paying with money. You can barter. You can offer to do work for nothing and pay it off that way. You can take a debt that's owed to you and pay off a bill, getting the creditors to accept that in payment. Lots of options are open to you. In passing, let's talk for a moment about interfamily debt, money that has been lent to or borrowed from your loved ones. The family is a powerful metaphysical unit. into which we incarnate in order to learn about life. Its value is that it creates a protection around us and allows individuals to work out their karmic stuff in a friendly setting. I believe in reincarnation. In any family setting, there will be metaphysically eons of accumulated karma and situations that can all get sorted out in the space of just a few years. The beauty of the family unit is that it is a hotbed in which we learn about love. And love, in the end, is the saving grace of humanity. In that light, how can we let family debt come between us? I believe that you don't owe your family anything, and they in turn don't owe you. Whatever financial transactions have been incurred at are part of the great karmic melting pot into which you and your family members have been cast. If you accept the theory of reincarnation, there is no way of knowing who owes what to whom. It's sad, therefore, if you can visit your mom's because you owe her a grand or two. The family creditor is as trapped as the family debtor because the emotion of the interfamily debt often creates such difficulty for you all to become free, you will have to sort it out. The best solution is for everyone in the family to forgive everyone else. So you go to your close relative and tell them straight, I love you, but you ain't getting it. You will have to forgive my debt. This family needs to be free. In a world where the common people are so manipulated and controlled by the system, the family should stand as a symbol of spirituality and self reliance. It should be loving, strong, and free. It's important that the combined strength of that unit should be used by its members to liberate themselves, not to bind each other. If everyone were magnanimous and understood things from a more infinite, loving perspective, true heights of spirituality and joy could be attained. Either way, whether they will forgive your debts or not, I walk away and forgive myself. Of course, not all interfamily transactions create negativity. If an arrangement is loving and helpful and everybody's happy with it, then see it through. But so often this is not the case. Part of your intention should be to face the fact and fix it. The thing is to heal yourself before the pressure of your financial commitments makes you ill and therefore useless to yourself and others. We are only here in this life for a short time, 23,000 days maybe. Why would you want to spend any amount of those particular days in a state of anguish over something that is not real? Money is a thought form, and so is debt. Why mess around arguing, trying to change people's opinion? The bank says you owe, that's its opinion. You have another thought form that says, I owe, but you ain't getting it. In the infinity of things, these piddly little arguments are irrelevant. Of course, if everyone didn't pay, the world would grind to a halt. But the fact is that only a small percentage default. If you have to be among that percentage, so what? By lying on the hospital bed of finances for a while, you can heal yourself and get on with the rest of your life. The force of your will is immediately strengthened as you go into a new balance. Then, if that balance is sustained through a financial discipline, it will bring you wealth. Very likely, that wealth will generate work, energy, and enthusiasm for yourself and those around you. So what you took out of the pool on an energy level by defaulting on your debts, you can repay later by becoming successful. Over the next 10 years, you will see a massive restructuring of the world's economies. Since the Second World War, the Western democracies have printed paper money like crazy. Enormous debts have been racked up by the various governments that will never be repaid. One day, everyone will have to stop telling themselves a pack of lies, and the whole thing will have to be sorted out. When the day comes, confidence will temporarily be lost and will go into a dramatic cash crunch. We will experience what the economists call stagflation, which is inflation with zero growth or a negative annual growth. In that situation, anyone with cash in hand instantly becomes king. While prices will be going up in some areas, such as food, in others, they will plummet. In the 1930s, commercial real estate fell up to 90% in some areas. Why spend $5 million dollars on a beachfront mansion today when in 5 or 7 years' time you can have the same property for 50 or 100 grand down? The point is, if you begin to work your way out of debt and you go to cash, it's never a mistake. Cash gives you options. If all your assets are locked in or you have no available cash, it restricts you. When the cash crunch comes, fantastic opportunities will be available to you, so you need have no fear. Many of the great fortunes of America were created in the 1930s. Entire industries were brought up for just pennies on the dollar. Of course, everything goes back to what your intention is. If you heal yourself financially and go to cash and have patience, in a few years' time, everything that you have ever dreamed of will be yours. But you have to have vision and you have to be able to read the writing on the wall. In the early 1930s, there were wealthy families in Germany and Austria that read the developing situations as the Nazis came to power. They sold everything at full price and got out of there. In changing in a changing situation, it is not compulsory to get yourself chewed out. There is always plenty of warning. The metaphysically sophisticated will always be LG, long game, as we call it. The only thing that stands in your way is the clarity of your intention and the clarity of the eagle eye that you bring to your action plan. Let us look at that now. Dollar Dance Concept 13. Becoming rich is a hands on process.